Aisha Williams was no ordinary teenager.
At just 17 years old, she possessed an unwavering determination that set her apart from other students at her high school. Her love for athletics began as a child, watching the Olympics alongside her father, Marcus. Every evening after school, she put on her sneakers and ran in her neighborhood park, perfecting her stride, perfecting her breathing. She wasn't just running for competition, she was running for excellence, for the future, and above all, to honor the hard work of her parents. His talent was undeniable. Aisha had won several local and regional competitions, breaking school records and attracting the attention of university recruiters. His goal was clear: to win an athletic scholarship to one of the best universities in the country, a dream that required discipline, sacrifice, and resilience. Every morning, before the sun even rose, she was on the track, training tirelessly under the watchful eyes of her coach. After school, while other students relaxed, she returned to the field, pushing her limits again and again. But Aisha was not only an outstanding athlete, she was also a brilliant student. His mother, Layla, a literature teacher, had instilled in him the importance of education from an early age. A strong body is good, but a full head is even better, she often told him. Aisha excelled in class, particularly in science and mathematics. Her intelligence, combined with her sporting talent, made her a source of inspiration for many of her classmates. Some admired him, others envied him. His father, Marcus Williams, was more than just a lawyer. He was a symbol of struggle, a man who had dedicated his career to defending victims of racial injustice and police brutality. His name was known far beyond their city. He had won historic cases, tackling systemic discrimination with formidable eloquence and tenacity. He knew that in a world where black success was too often seen as a threat, his daughter would encounter obstacles much greater than the hurdles she cleared on the athletics track. This is why, from a young age, Marcus had taught Aisha to never give in to adversity. The success of black people is disturbing, Aisha. But always remember one thing: they cannot take away what you earn through your hard work. These words were engraved in her. Every time she felt skeptical eyes on her during competitions, every time a teacher seemed surprised by her excellent grades, she remembered what her father had told her. But there was one person who, more than all the others, took a very dim view of his rise. Brian Carter was the archetype of the boy who always had everything without really fighting. Coming from an influential family, he had grown up with the idea that he was destined for success. Tall, athletic, and until recently a champion of the high school track team, he was used to being in the spotlight. For years, he had been the face of sports at their establishment. But when Aisha arrived, everything had changed. Little by little, his name began to disappear from local press articles, replaced by that of a young black girl who, according to him, had nothing to do at his level. When she broke her sprint record, it was the last straw. Brian's jealousy turned into resentment. His frustration was fueled by his parents' upbringing. His father, an influential businessman, had never hidden his contempt for minorities. "Black people take everything that belongs to us," he often repeated at the table. His mother, from an old conservative family, was not much better. She constantly complained about the favoritism granted to black athletes, refusing to admit that Aisha's excellence had nothing to do with imaginary privileges, but with hard work. In the high school hallways, Brian and his circle of racist friends would mutter insults as Aisha passed by. They downplayed her victories, claiming she was lucky or boosted by affirmative action. But Aisha, strong from the education her parents had given her, paid them no attention. However, it didn't take long for this contempt to turn into something far more dangerous. Brian could no longer stand to see Aisha shine. He wanted to remind her of her place. The evening was still lively after the regional competition. In the stands of the gymnasium, spectators were enthusiastically discussing the breathtaking race that Aisha had just won. She had left her competitors far behind, crossing the finish line with an ease that testified to her talent and relentless training. The college recruiters present had taken notes, some nodding in admiration. His future seemed brighter than ever. But while she collected her things in the locker room, ignoring the envious looks of some students, a dull tension hung in the air. She didn't yet know that someone was waiting for her. As he left the gymnasium, under the pale light of the street lamps, Brian Carter clenched his fists, his face contorted with frustration. He was not alone. Beside him, two of his friends, Ethan and Josh, shared his contempt. All three had grown up together, from the same privileged circles, nourished by the same toxic speeches at home. They had learned to see their success as a right, not as something to be earned. When Aisha walked through the door, bag on her shoulder, still electrified by her victory, Brian moved forward with a determined step. "Do you think you're better than us?" he blurted out in a voice full of contempt. Aisha stopped abruptly, surprised by his aggressive tone. She looked him straight in the eyes, without blinking.
I don't believe anything. I work hard, that's all.
His calm only fueled Brian's anger. How dare she respond with such confidence? He wanted to see her hesitant, afraid, submissive. But Aisha showed no fear. She stood straight, head held high, as her father had always taught her. Ethan sneered next to Brian, crossing his arms defiantly. "Look at her, Brian. She really thinks she deserves all this." The words whistled like blades. Brian's rage reached its peak. He approached suddenly and, without warning, violently pushed her against the gymnasium wall. The shock was brutal. Pain exploded in Aisha's shoulder, but she did not fall. She remained standing, straightening up immediately despite the burn that radiated down her arm. Around them, a few students who were leaving the scene had stopped, alerted by the altercation. Some discreetly took out their phones, filming the scene without intervening. "You have nothing to do here." Brian stared at her with a look full of hatred. "White people win here, you should know that." Aisha felt her heart racing. Not out of fear, but out of a dull anger that was brewing inside her. She knew it wasn't just his victory that pushed him over the edge. That was everything she represented. A young black woman who excelled in a field where he thought he was untouchable. She took a deep breath and said, in a calm but firm voice,
"Don't touch me."
Aisha's tone was icy, sharp. She wasn't going to be intimidated. But Brian wasn't done yet. His humiliation was not enough for him. His gaze darkened, and with an impulsive movement, he raised his hand, ready to strike her. A cry arose from the crowd that had formed. "Hey!
What's going on here?"
A professor had just appeared, his voice echoing in the corridor outside. Mr. Hawkins, a respected teacher known for not tolerating any form of injustice, strode forward. Aisha was still there, motionless, her back straight. His gaze did not leave that of Brian, who had just lowered his hand, taken aback by the professor's intervention.
"Are you crazy?"
Mr. Hawkins exclaimed, glaring at Brian.
"Carter, in my office."
Immediately.
The murmurs intensified in the crowd.
Brian knew he was in bad shape, but his pride refused to let him go without a last word. "It is she who takes everything that should be ours," he muttered under his breath. Aisha clenched her fists. Her body was still tense from the adrenaline, but she knew that this fight would not be won with violence. His father had always told him, the greatest victories are not won with fists, but with the truth. So, without another word, she picked up her bag and turned on her heel, leaving Brian to face the consequences of his actions. But what she didn't know was that the video of the altercation had already started to spread on social networks. The next morning, the video of the attack had already made the rounds on social networks. Thousands of people expressed their indignation under the hashtag #JusticeSeparation. Marcus, seeing the video, felt cold anger invade him. But instead of reacting impulsively, he made a strategic decision. He was going to make this attack a symbol of the fight against racism. He immediately contacted an influential journalist and organized a press conference in front of the school. Surrounded by community leaders, other parents and Aisha's comrades, he spoke in a firm and controlled voice. "What happened to my daughter is not an isolated case. Too often, our children are attacked simply because they are excelling. But this time, we are not going to let it go."
The affair made headlines.
Brian and his family tried to downplay the event, But under media pressure, the school was forced to take action. When Marcus Williams filed a complaint against Brian Carter, he knew he was up against more than just a jealous and violent teenager. He was confronting a system. A system which, for centuries, had minimized attacks against black people. A system where the privileges of certain influential families allowed them to escape the consequences of their actions. Brian's parents, panicked by the turn the affair was taking, put pressure on the school administration to prevent the incident from being overly publicized. They called on top lawyers to protect their son, hoping that the influence of their name would be enough to crush the case before it grew too big. But Marcus wasn't one to back down. He assembled a formidable legal team, made up of civil law experts and activists committed to the fight against racial discrimination. He not only demanded justice for Aisha, but also the opening of an investigation into the school's practices. "This is not an isolated incident," he declared during a press conference. "How many young black girls have had to endure this kind of injustice in silence, without witnesses, without video to prove what they were going through? Today we have the proof. And we are going to fight so that it does not happen again." The media coverage of the affair was dazzling. Social networks were set ablaze. Public figures, athletes, singers, writers, and even politicians took a stand. "Aisha Williams represents all these young black women who always have to prove that they deserve their place," declared a famous Olympic athlete. "His fight is our fight." Demonstrations were organized in front of the school, demanding measures against racist harassment. Black students at the high school began to speak out about their own experiences of discrimination. Some recounted the insults they had suffered, others the way in which certain professors underestimated their abilities, or how similar incidents had been hushed up by the administration. Faced with this national pressure, the school district announced an in-depth investigation into discrimination within schools. On the day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Journalists were stationed in front of the entrance, capturing every moment of this affair which had become a symbol of the fight against systemic racism in education.
Aisha stood straight, dignified.
When she was called to testify, she took a deep breath and told her story with calm and determination. She explained her love for athletics, her efforts to succeed, and the pain of being attacked simply for excelling. Brian was unrecognizable. He no longer appeared like the arrogant teenager he had been. He avoided Aisha's gaze, staring nervously at the table in front of him. The video of the attack was shown in court. In the room, murmurs of indignation could be heard as the images played. The words spoken by Brian resonated violently. "You have nothing to do here. It's the white people who win here, you should know that." When Brian was asked to speak, he stammered out a flimsy excuse prepared by his lawyers. But public opinion was not fooled. The verdict was in. Brian Carter was found guilty of assault and inciting racial hatred. He was sentenced to community service and to follow an educational program on the history of racial discrimination. While the sentence might seem lenient to some, the impact of this verdict went well beyond his personal case. Thanks to the pressure exerted by Marcus Williams, the activists and the thousands of people mobilized, reform was put in place in several states to strengthen sanctions against acts of racist harassment in schools. Mandatory training on discrimination and the history of racial injustices was introduced in high schools. A special fund was also created to support victims of educational discrimination. As for Aisha, she obtained the university scholarship she had hoped for and was recruited by one of the best athletic teams in the country. She continued to inspire young girls like her, proving that neither hatred nor adversity could extinguish her ambition. During a television interview, a journalist asked him, "What do you remember from this ordeal?" She thought for a moment, then replied with a determined smile, "That true strength lies not in violence or hatred, but in perseverance and justice." What Marcus Williams had done was more than just defending his daughter. He changed the course of history, proving to the United States and the world that dignity and determination could break the chains of injustice. And from now on, never again would an Aisha be alone in the face of oppression.